So here's a funny story. Black Ops 3 has been nominated a few times so far in a couple of different publications for the best science fiction game of the year, and on one publication, it was actually nominated for the best fantasy game of the year. Now let's just think about this for a second, because it's actually quite funny and sad all at the same time. Call of Duty, a game whose roots started in World War II, a franchise whose main success was turning an abstract military drama into a video game when it came to Call of Duty 4, has been nominated for fantasy. Now please tell me the YouTube audience not voting for this shit in between sessions and fucking themselves. Oh man, this is just the icing on the cake in this motherfucker. Now before I begin, the gameplay in the background comes from Jim Bob Leader 1337. You know, people gotta add that shit to the end of their name. And I just went out on the website on Prestige Gamers and shit like that, and I said, people, just send me in some footage. I just want to do some RAM footage, send me in some gameplay, hook it up, I'll put it in a video so I can do this motherfucker right here. He basically took his last fucking game that he recorded. Now, I could be a dick and put the final score in this motherfucker, which you guys are going to see it a little bit later. I could be a dick and really tell you what his final score is. He was 37 and 54. But seriously, if you're going to send me in something, don't you think you would send in something pretty good? I mean, 37 and 54, he's going to finish with the top score in his team. 37 and 54 is a pretty horrible fucking score. And granted, he finished in first place. He had the clutch at the end in this motherfucker. He was the one that played the objective on his team in this stupid fucking robot escort game. Oh, God, this shit is fucking stupid. I don't know. I was watching the video. Obviously, this is not a hipfire commentary video, so I could watch the video. I could watch the gameplay and shit like that. And I'm watching this stupid shit, and basically, you're trying to fucking escort the Terminator all the way to the other team's goddamn spawn point. This is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. If you're on the defensive team, you have the easiest fucking job. Just sit there and wait for a motherfucker to come to you. And granted, they have to basically keep coming up to the robot, basically moving that shit along. But this is a stupid fucking game mode. I can only imagine people who like to snipe, people who like to camp, people who like to sit in a fucking corner are probably the ones getting most of the kills in this goddamn game mode, because this is seriously one stupid fucking idea of a goddamn game mode, man. But anyways, getting into the point of the video, about a month or two ago, whenever the hell I did that damn video, I mentioned that Black Ops 3 just doesn't feel like Call of Duty anymore. It doesn't look like Call of Duty, and if you were to take away the words Call of Duty, not to mention this was created by Treyarch, it would probably be pretty hard to recognize that the campaign, at least, is a Call of Duty game. Storyline-wise, timeline-wise, and grounded military-wise, it's nothing like its older siblings. Nothing. I even went so far as to say the name Call of Duty should be removed from the game because it just doesn't resemble any of its original predecessors. It's now a bastardized product, ripping off other companies' ideas for content and slapping the name Call of Duty on the cover in order to make sales. Now let me be clear on a few things for a couple seconds, because usually people don't understand this concept of fiction versus science fiction versus fantasy. Obviously, there is nothing in Call of Duty that is real. It is not a simulator. It is not a real-time war-based game, and Call of Duty is basically a Hollywood movie turned into a video game. Yes, it's fiction. It will always be a fictional game, and will always be the furthest possible thing from a real war campaign. As gritty as their World War II games were, as much as they use real-life battles of the past to convey World War II, the ideas have always been fictitious pieces of work. Science fiction and fantasy over the years have really started to blend together. Now, if you were to go to a library, say 50 years ago or 100 years ago, you knew what fantasy was and what science fiction was. Fantasy was always things that could never, ever, ever exist, such as dragons and krakens, what the fuck? What do you pronounce that shit as? I've seen people say krakens, the movie that said krakens, but when you go back to the original fucking pronunciation of the motherfucker, it was said as kraken. So I don't know who fucked that shit up over the goddamn years, but I'm gonna call that shit kraken just for the sake of that shit. But anyway, you know, all these wizards and elves and vampires and shit, that's all fantasy. That's a genre to itself that you could almost always define by the fact that the overwhelming majority of that shit has never existed and will never exist. But science fiction sort of falls in between all of that. The concept behind it was usually defined as stories using potential future scenarios of technology that we've yet to create. So for older entertainment, space travel was considered science fiction. It wasn't dragons, that never existed, but that was something that could happen in the future. Yeah, we could space travel. We eventually got to the moon in this motherfucker, so it was a possible outcome. Robots, aliens, teleportation, time travel, alternate realities. There are a number of things that could fall into a category of science fiction, but probably the best definition of science fiction came from the very writer of The Twilight Zone. Rod Serling himself said, "Making the improbable possible is what defines science fiction. It's improbable that we'll ever be able to time travel, but science fiction can make it possible. It's not improbable that we'll ever create a dragon or a werewolf. That's impossible. That's fantasy. That shit is not fucking happening in any of our goddamn lifetimes. Black Ops 3 falls squarely in the realm of science fiction. There's no question about that, along with Black Ops 2, Advanced Warfare, and you could probably even throw Ghost in that when you look back at that alternate reality, South America become one giant conglomerate. Oh, get the fuck out of here with this. You know, seriously, what the fuck? Who signed off on that shit? Who thought it was a seriously good idea to just get all the South American countries, a lot of them which don't fucking like each other to begin with, and turn them into one giant fucking enemy? What the fuck was that? Man, I ain't gonna give a shit. But look, it's an accurate description at this point to say that Black Ops 3 is obviously science fiction. And yes, Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3, and even to a certain extent Call of Duty 4, they had some technology that didn't exist yet. But those games weren't set in the far future. They were set in maybe the short, distant future from there. But like what? 5 years or so of shit like that, but they were far from a science fiction category in this motherfucker. And this leads me to the heart of my argument that I made a few months ago. Why has Call of Duty changed their formula and turned the franchise into science fiction? And why the fuck are they doing it with all three studios? You know, I can understand if they wanted to dabble in science fiction for a little while. I can understand if they wanted to test the waters on a futuristic game to see how the audience responds to it. So when Black Ops 2 decided to go 10 years into the future, only to have absolutely bullshit people claiming the technology was only 10 fucking years away. You know, on a side note, I'm gonna get into this shit, man, because I haven't get rant about this shit enough times all those fucking years. Whoever's around long enough on my channel, remember rants about that shit? Yeah. From the moment cocksucker Vonderhaar said that, I called bullshit, and I said how none of that technology will exist 10 years from now. We don't have fucking jets with propellers on them, and we never will. All the prototypes have already been dismissed by the US military. We're never gonna have a fucking jet that has a propeller on the side of this motherfucker. Walking tanks will never exist in the future because of structural weaknesses. They took Peter Singer's suggestions. He's an author who's worked for the government as a consultant on future military strategy and shit. This dude's legit. There's no question about that. This motherfucker knows his shit. They took his suggestions and then amped up the rhetoric that all of this was 10 years away and these are items that we're going to be seeing. Bullshit. Singer's position has always been to show what potential there could be, but he's even the first to admit that most technology is never going to happen. Just because you have a patent on something, just because you have a prototype on something, doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means that somebody is testing the capabilities of whether or not it can work. Treyarch decided that wasn't good enough to back all their ideas, so they decided to twist his endorsement and lie about what they actually thought future technology was going to be, just to sell their damn game. He never said all that shit was potential. Treyarch went out and said, oh yeah, this is the expert, and he said these are things that could happen in the future. He's like, these are things that are possible, these are things that are going to happen, and these are things that are crazy, but we do have an idea that they're going to happen. Get the fuck out of here with that shit, man. Treyarch just lied through their teeth when it came to Black Ops 2. But anyways, getting back on track here, Black Ops 2 going into the future, it wasn't a bad idea at the time, don't get me wrong. We already had current warfare with Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Lagfare 3. Oh, I can't rip that game enough. They milked World War II for everything it was worth in multiple games. Black Ops 1 did the Vietnam War, so a future game made sense at the time. Ghost then created that weird bullshit, which was followed up by Advanced Warfare, another science fiction game trying to justify the use of technology that would never fucking happen. And no, I'm not going to get into the argument over the exosuits again. They exist, obviously. I know that. But what has never changed is the human body. The stress of the suits and the ability of the suits tax the human body past the limits of what we can actually tolerate. We can't super jump. We can't super run by having a suit do it for us because our bones and our ligaments are just not capable of absorbing that amount of stress yet. It's not humanly possible to use exosuits like that, and we never will because our bodies have to change first before we're able to use that shit. So I'm not going to get into that full argument again. But here we are now in fucking fantasy. Black Ops 3 has arrived, and while prior games were certainly science fiction, one publication has gone so far as to call it fantasy. Yes, Call of Duty, you're officially in Lord of the Rings, The Witcher's category. You've crossed over into dragons, unicorns, and Wookiees territory. Your reasoning and logic for futuristic military ideas isn't even considered plausible or improbable anymore. It's considered impossible. And yes, that was only one publication that feels that way, but fuck it, it's pretty damn funny that at least one publication classified the game that way. Most others will classify their games into categories like shooter, action games, RPG games, strategy games, rip-off free-to-play games on phones that appeal to bored housewives not getting laid enough like Candy Crush and shit like that. But Black Ops 3 has now been listed as fantasy, motherfucker. At some point, Activision is just going to have to pull one of their studios back to reality. It's just bound to happen. I said it a long time ago, but they had a perfect opportunity to have their studios create a game in the past, the present, and the future. And you can go in pretty much any direction they wanted, but so far, they have continued to go with Future Warfare. Well, they'll like to point out that Black Ops 3 sold pretty well. It's actually sold pretty well compared to some of the prior 2 games, but it's certainly not near the peak of Modern Warfare 3. That was just sad as shit. Modern Warfare 3 is the all-time best-selling Call of Duty game. Can you believe that shit? That's the all-time best-selling one. But anyway, that happens to be the all-time best-selling game. Black Ops 3 is not even going to approach those numbers, but Activision likes to brag that, hey, Black Ops 3 outsold all our prior 2 games. Well, yeah, well, your prior 2 games sucked. That's not saying much, motherfucker. But anyways, Activision has basically ignored people's requests to go back to some type of historic war event. It doesn't have to be World War II, it could be some other historic event. But the fact that we basically sat in future for all this time makes it feel about as worn out as a homeless man's underwear at this point. Eventually, they're going to have to change. Eventually, they're going to have to go into a past war theater again, since we haven't had that in 5 full years. Now, Infinity Ward is next up in the rotation, and we'll see if they stupidly make Ghost 2 or if they smartly pick up something else and actually create it. I'm guessing Infinity Ward is going to do the exact same stupid thing they did last time. They're going to make Ghost 2 because they're fucking lazy and incompetent. Activision's going to say, yeah, you know what? Go with Ghost 2. That sounds like a good fucking idea. So yes, we're going to get some more science fiction, possibly even more fantasy. Who gives a fuck at this point? But at the very least, Black Ops 3 hasn't been given too many Game of the Year awards at this point. Instead, most of them have gone to The Witcher, most of them have gone to Fallout, Metal Gear, Bloodborne. Those are the top 4 games that have been winning awards across all the categories and shit like that. But it's still pretty fucking funny that Black Ops 3 has now been classified as a fantasy game. Yes, you're in the same category as Final Fantasy at this point, motherfucker. That is just absolutely hilarious. It goes to show you they have lost all connection and all ties to the original purpose of the game. A real-world military shooter, a grounded shooter using obviously a fictional story, but a historical war and showing the true effects of war. Now you're just going for all-out Hollywood bullshit. I mean, they practically copied all of Destiny's multiplayer at this point with all those fucking powers and shit like that. So next one, they might as well go after Mass Effect and shit. That's what I want to see. I want to see biotic powers, a blue motherfucker throwing fireballs out of their damn hands. That'll be fucking awesome in the next game. But anyways, in the end, Activision's obviously going to do whatever game they feel makes them the most money. Whether they go with science fiction, whether they actually go back to historical war, or they continue this bullshit of fantasy fucking shit all the way in the goddamn future that'll never happen. Whatever it is they feel makes them money, they're gonna do, because they're assholes like that. We have absolutely no say in this motherfucker. But I'll tell you right now, the day Call of Duty has a dragon in that shit as a kill streak, I'm riding that motherfucker no matter what. Anyways, that does it for this video. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, Friday's Christmas. I highly doubt I'm going to have a video, and if I do have a video that day, it's going to be something short, sweet, because I like to enjoy the holidays around this time. Next week, I'm going to be answering all your questions that you guys send in. So for those of you who haven't sent in a question in, you can feel free to do so. You can send it to me here on YouTube or send it to me over at Prestige Games. Or if you want, just go check out the video. I have all the instructions there. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit. And I'll see you guys in the next video.